Good afternoon and welcome to Alta Asks Live. I'm Beth Spotswood, Alta's digital editor, and I am so excited to be here once again. It's August now. We started this in May, and at the time we were like, let's try and do it until May 15th. And we are now in the middle of August, but I'm very excited to be here as usual with our host, Heather Scott Partington. She's an Alta contributor and about to leave us to go teach high school via Zoom. And we're here with LA Times journalist, Alta contributor, author, fabulously funny and interesting person, Gustavo Arellano. I'm going to let Heather and Gustavo chat while I do. Please ask questions, use the chat feature, or there's an ask a question button. I will be monitoring that, and I'll loop back in with Gustavo at the end to try and answer as many of your questions as we can. Have a great time. And with that, I'm going to get out of the way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Hi, Gustavo.
What's up?
Nothing is up. Actually, I just spent all day. I'm trying to get ready to teach starting tomorrow, high school. So,
oh my Lord.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just on a one track. I'm a one track mind right now. How have you been during the pandemic?
Just writing for the Los Angeles Times, but also assisting at my wife's store. Also, interestingly enough, named Alta Baja Market here in Santana. So I get to be the cashier. I was already the delivery driver and the guy who picks up all the produce and whatnot. But I've had a front row seat to how the coronavirus has affected, especially the restaurant industry across the United States and obviously specifically Southern California. I do not envy restaurateurs. It just confirms to me that only truly brave people go into the restaurant industry. And thankfully, my wife, she has very loyal clientele. So she's breaking even right now, which is insane. Like, it's incredibly successful right now. Meanwhile, so many of our colleagues or her contemporaries are at least down 50%, if not more, if not already closed.
So speaking about restaurants, we have to get something out of the way that's very controversial that has to do with you and Alta. You're sort of infamous around Alta for one of your most popular pieces has to do with your opinion about In-N-Out. And can you just briefly just kind of give us a summary of how you feel about In-N-Out, what you wrote about in the piece?
It was a very simple essay. All I said, I didn't say In-N-Out was horrible. I said In-N-Out was overrated. I mean, the headline was that In-N-Out is so, which I didn't write that headline, but I don't also disagree with it. Look, the hamburger is great. The double is great. The secret menu is fun and whatnot. But are you really going to wait in line an hour for that? No. The French fries taste like overdone pencil shavings. And even if that's well done, then that means it's really well done pencil shavings. The shakes are magnificent. I love the shakes. But honestly, for the In-N-Out burger, what's most remarkable for me is just how crisp the lettuce is. And do you really want to eat a burger like that? So it was just a simple opinion. Oh, my Lord, this is going to follow me to my grave. Every couple of months, people will just mention an In-N-Out, just a comment, and I just have to always go there and say In-N-Out is overrated. And then the fanboys comes piling on, and I just say In-N-Out fanboys are the worst. It gets better from there, and it's all because of Alta. God bless Alta. I've done so many articles for Alta. I love publishing for the Journal. I don't write enough, unfortunately, now because I'm with the LA Times. But it's that one that, by the way, never actually came out in the magazine. It was an online only exclusive, and it has taken a myth of its own, even within Alta and beyond.
So you have a history of interacting with your fans. You're really interactive. Can you talk about the Instagram Live events or things that you've been doing lately?
So as I say, oh my Lord, because it's a bunch of babble. I as part of coronavirus, actually what ended up happening was for Occidental College down here in Los Angeles, they have something called the Institute for the Study of Los Angeles. And so I'm their scholar in residence this year. And one of the things that I wanted to do was live lectures, and we were going to have them a whole great, series of them. Coronavirus hits, we can't do them anymore. So I decided to start doing some of them on Instagram Live. And then one day, I think it was late at night, I was here cataloging all my books, and there's so many other books around me. I said, let's just, let's try this out. I'm just going to start babbling, see if there's any audience. I always like to interact with people on social media. I'm notorious for responding to every single tweet and comment possible, even with the haters. And I have a newsletter that called Gustavo Arellano's Weekly. You can go to gustavoarellano.org to sign up. It's like a missive along with all the stuff that I've done for the week. And so I obviously used to do a column called Ask a Mexican. So I love answering people's questions. So I decided, okay, let's do every Tuesday night around 10:15 Pacific Standard Time in the evening. I'll just answer people's questions about whatever. Call it Gritale Guti, which Gritale means like, call out to Gustavo, Guti being a nickname for Gustavo. So, or better yet, the acronym GAG, because that's what the entire experience probably does to people at the end. They gag at the end. It's like, oh my God, how long can this guy talk without breathing?
And you respond to written questions during the Instagram Live?
Well, the funny thing about doing Gritale Guti is that I don't have any aspirations of making this into something big. It is literally as low rent as possible. The only illumination is a light above me. And then right now I have a lot of daylight because I have a sunlight coming in where we live and just a computer screen. So I badger people. The rule is I will try to get to your question, but you have to ask in the little box. So like right now, what's going on with here, what we're doing with Alta. If I see a question in the comment section, I'll probably Hector you. The way I see myself is, I don't know if he had to come up out in Northern California, but Dr. Gene Scott, he was this legendary televangelist who used to come out on the television station down here in LA. He had this big, huge mega church in downtown LA, and he was most famous. Werner Herzog actually did a documentary about him called God's Angry Man, and all Gene Scott would do these. He was actually a brilliant guy. He would do biblical passages. He knew how to speak Greek and Aramaic, and he'd try to decipher the Bible, but then he'd flat out tell people, I need money. What are you doing? Why are you not giving me money? There's a phone line, call right now. So I don't ask for money, but I will badger my audience. Like, and I actually tell people, if you ask me a question I have already answered, I am going to call you out. And better yet, I am going to let Guti's gang just pile up on you like a real gang.
Nice. So, and something a little bit more formal that you've been working on during the pandemic, you have a podcast with the LA Times where you're talking to different people about how their lives are affected by the pandemic. Have you been conducting those interviews? Obviously, you've probably been conducting them remotely. What has that experience been like for you?
So coronavirus in California, stories from the front line. It was a 40-episode special. We wanted to sync up with like a quarantine. A quarantine, if you folks remember, is technically supposed to be 40 days. It's from the Italian for 40 days. And so we tried to give as widespread an experience of how coronavirus has impacted Californians. So I talked to people who were in prison. I talked to ICE detainees. I talked to mariachis who were out of work. I talked to restaurateurs. I talked to people whose family members had passed away. And to me, it was a powerful experience. And all of them are very short, by the way, just 15-minute snippets. Nothing, maybe the longest was about 17 minutes or so. We didn't really try to talk to famous people or officials. We just really wanted to talk to, again, this run-of-the-mill Californian, which is everyone and no one at the same time. It was a very moving experience to hear how people are dealing with coronavirus, to hear how people are trying to spin this. And the sad thing about it for me, like, it was supposed to be only 40 episodes. It ended, I think it was in June when it ended, because we figured, oh, after 40 days, we'll all be back to our normal lives. Kind of like what Beth alluded to in doing this. And here we are, what is it, August 12th, coronavirus is not seem to go anywhere. We didn't continue it, though, because we had run it on such a short staff. We needed a break, but there might be something in the podcast world coming up from the LA Times in that vein. Details to come.
Oh, great. We'll look forward to that. You mentioned prison, and that's actually a good segue for me into talking about a recent piece that you wrote for Alta. So you wrote a piece about a band, Mexican band that played at Folsom Prison. Can you just talk a little bit about, oops, I just knocked my desk, a little bit about what they did and why that was such a significant performance?
Los Tigres de Norte is one of the most legendary bands in Mexico at this point of all times, but especially over the past 50 years. They actually are from, they're even though they're from Mexico, they started their career in San Jose. Legendarily, they actually once shared a billing with Janis Joplin in San Francisco, of all folks. So late 60s. Well, these guys must have been 15 years old. They became famous in the genre of conjunto norteño, which is going to be the accordion, the metronomic bass, and whatnot. So they did a documentary. They did a live concert, a CD, and a documentary. So I reviewed the documentary. They did a concert at Folsom Prison, specifically in honor of the 50th anniversary of Johnny Cash doing the same, but also to highlight how much prison life has now changed in California. When Johnny Cash did it, it was still mostly white folks in prison. Now the prison system in California, super majority people of color, I believe Latinos make up to 60 to 70% of it. So they highlighted some of the stories of these prisoners. And at the very least, you could turn it on. It's on Netflix. It was Netflix special. You could have in the background. You're going to enjoy hearing all this music, but it's so great to hear these stories, heartbreaking stories. There was one guy in particular who said, like, I, myself, and my family, we want to be the next Los Tigres del Norte. He played the accordion. He got caught up in murder. And so even though it was kind of you could see where it was leading up to, that this guy was going to play alongside Los Tigres del Norte, the payoff was still very, very emotional. And they played a song, Un Día a la Vez. It's the Spanish language version of One Day at a Time, very famous country western song talking about being sober from alcoholism and whatnot. So it was great to be able to write it for Alta. And especially, it meant a lot to me because my major was film studies in college. So I never get to write film reviews anymore. So only Alta would allow me to do something like that.
The other piece that I'm thinking of that was really touching was the piece that's it was titled in one place "Buried Secrets" and in other places "The Tomb of the Unknown Wetback." And that name, which is terrible, comes from Operation Wetback in the 1950s. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And it's such a phenomenal story. It has such an emotional payoff. Can you just talk about what led you down the path of starting on that story it was 2016, I believe, right?
Yeah, no, this is a story that ended up taking me about 4 years to do. It all started with a newspaper clipping that I did while Trump was not even in office yet, but I knew what was coming. And so I started going into the archives of newspaper clippings about Operation Wetback. Operation Wetback, that is the official government name to a program that in the 1950s ended up deporting over 1 million undocumented immigrants. It was roughly between 1953 and 1955. So in the clippings, I found a story about an undocumented immigrant who was killed, shot in the back by a police officer. And what disturbed me was the headline, autopsy performed on slain wetback. To reduce someone to that ugly term just disturbed me so much. So I wanted to find out, okay, what was the story? How did this man end up being shot by a police officer? But the background behind the story was way, way, way crazier. It involved everything from self-hating Mexicans to a pioneering LGBT nephew of this man, Juan Diaz Peña, to a tomb that had no tombstone at Holy Sepulchre Cemetery in Orange of this man, Juan Diaz Peña. And then finally, this is a story that I want to do in 2016. I finally did it for Alta in 2020. And the trigger was the death of the passing of my mother. And on the day of her funeral, one of the workers at Holy Sepulchre who I'd been working with and trying to figure out what was the story behind Peña comes to me and says, hey, someone bought a tombstone for him. And then finally ended with me holding a service in Juan Diaz Peña's name and playing the song by Woody Guthrie, Deportee, Plane Wreck at Los Gatos, talking about an incident where about 25 undocumented immigrants died at Los Gatos in Central California. Yet the newspapers only they paid more attention to the 3 white people on board than the 28 people and just referred to them as deportees. So talk about twists and turns. It was such an honor to finally be able to do that story. And this is a story that I pitched to so many publications over the years, yet only Alta had the courage, frankly, to allow me to do it. And so shout out to Blaise Arega, the editor of Alta, to not only allow me to pursue my vision for this story, but then ultimately publishing it.
It's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. I really I know Beth's probably dropping it in the comments in the chat for everybody to check it out. I really recommend that people do that. So what are you working on now? What kinds of things are you curious about right now? Are you pursuing right now?
I am
Anything?
curious about everything. I mean, when people ask me to describe my job at the Los Angeles Times, I tell them my task is to tell us who we were, who we are, and who we're becoming as Californians. So I try to do stories that connect the dots into that, to show folks that we are not living in unique times. This too shall pass. This too has happened. So I'm doing stories, everything. My most recent story for the Los Angeles Times, I did a story about a waitress, Lucy Reyes, who had worked at Meat La Cafe in San Bernardino for 68 years. And Meat La Cafe is one of the oldest Mexican restaurants in Southern California, if not the entire state. But more importantly, it's a restaurant that Glenn Bell of Taco Bell fame got the quote, was quote unquote inspired to do tacos from eating the tacos at Meat La Cafe. So how do you mourn a legend during the time of coronavirus? I did a story about how her family and customers did in a parking lot at Meat La Cafe, let balloons go. I'm also working the Los Angeles Times. We're doing something on the 50th anniversary of the Chicano moratorium. This was one of the largest protests against the Vietnam War, and it happened to involve Mexican Americans, Chicanos, in East LA. Nowadays, it's most famous because that's also the day when pioneering Los Angeles Times columnist Ruben Salazar was killed by a tear gas canister to the head, shot by a Los Angeles sheriff's deputy. So I'm doing something, and so many of my colleagues are doing that. It's going to be a great package. I'm doing something reading Ruben Salazar, so analyzing him as a writer instead of as a myth. And the big thing that I'm doing actually isn't with Los Angeles Times right now, but I'm doing with KCRW, the NPR station down here in Santa Monica, the 3rd annual Tortilla Tournament, in which we get 64 tortillas, 32 corn, 32 flour, match them up like a sports tournament to try to figure out what is the best tortilla in Southern California. So hashtag Tortilla Tournament. Check in with me about September 16th, and your tortilla mind will be blown away.
Sounds delicious. That's amazing. I have to ask you one more thing, which is like kind of a weird thing to ask, but in the description of the podcast, the Corona Virus in California podcast on the LA Times website, it mentions the late, great Hugh Hauser, and it talks about people being Hugh Hauser fans in California. Are you a Hugh Hauser fan yourself?
Not only was I a Hugh Hauser fan, but he was a personal friend of myself. And I actually had the honor. Yeah, I had the honor of being the very first person to write that he had passed away. And it was so shocking that no one believed me. No one, Gustavo, here he is, just writing some drivel again. No one believed me until finally people were able to confirm about 2 hours later. So I had that honor. No, Hugh is one of the, literally, I mean, what else can unite Californians except, yes, not Vin Scully, because I know you folks up in the Bay Area don't care at all about the Dodgers, so it can't be Vin Scully. That's what we think in Southern California. It's not In-N-Out because there's going to be haters of In-N-Out, but it's Hugh Hauser. Nothing else unites California like Hugh Hauser. Everyone loved him. My favorite Hugh Hauser story was when I first met him. I actually interviewed him. He was doing a special on Anaheim, where I was born and raised and grew up and still live. And I went to a small little Mexican restaurant, a chicken place, El Pollo Fino, right off of Anaheim Boulevard. And I figured, no one's going to show up. I could interview him in peace. We'll talk for about half an hour. We ended up talking for 3 hours because everyone interrupted him. Judges, gang members, police officers, Latino immigrants who could barely speak Spanish, but they knew who he was, and everyone had to tell him what their favorite episode was. And Hugh, God bless his soul, listened to every single person. This was a man who knew he was loved and was never going to take that for granted.
That's great. It's so great. Well, we're going to have Beth come back and ask some questions from the audience, but before we do that, I just wanted to say it's been a joy to speak to you, and I can't wait to read all of the other things that you're working on right now. And so we'll have Beth pop back in, and if we have questions from the audience.
We do. Well, you answered one of them, which is the Tortilla Tournament. How are you going to do it in the pandemic, though?
Oh, so I'm going to do an entire, and by the way, when we do this Tortilla Tournament, there's going to be online components. There's going to be components on radio, Good Food with Evan Kleiman. But there was definitely a hesitance in wanting to do this tortilla tournament because to get these tortillas, well, you have to go out to these restaurants and buy them. And so how would we do them? But at the end, I figured we have to push through, because now more than ever, we need to promote small businesses. And this was an opportunity to promote a lot of small businesses. So as a Tortilla Tournament stands right now, I can't reveal everyone here, how far we're going to go. But just to give you an example, last year it extended and it's all Southern California for now, but it extended all the way from Santa Barbara to Indio, where the Coachella Music Festival is, all the way down to San Juan Capistrano in deepest, darkest Orange County. This year, we're going to have 51 different tortillas. So I went to all these tortillerias, bought them, distributed them to my fellow judges. And this was about 3 weeks ago. I have not gotten coronavirus, so obviously it turned out to be safe. But I got to tell you, every single step of the way, I was careful. I had my mask on, I had gloves, I had hand sanitizer. There was one tortilleria that I wanted to go to, but I saw the workers, no one was wearing masks. I walked out. There was no way on earth am I going to put these people, my fellow judges or myself, at risk.
Oh, exclusion from the Tortilla Tournament if you're not following basic health.
You have to follow the codes, my lord. Folks, hashtag wear a mask. How hard is it to wear a mask, especially if you're a restaurateur and you're encountering different people every single day? You have to wear a mask. Come on, folks.
Wear a mask. Okay. I've got a question from Will Hurst, Gustavo.
Oh, yeah. Will, what's
up? Will and Gustavo did an interview together at the Commonwealth Club a couple of years ago in San Francisco. Gustavo came to Northern California. All right. Will says, film critic, what are you watching these days? What do you love? What do you hate? What are you streaming?
Oh man, this is the irony. I was a film studies major, but I never see films anymore. I've gone out to the movie theaters. I'm not kidding. Maybe 10 times in the past 15 years. When I get home, all I watch is the local news and ESPN. It's my wife who sees all these other movies. But in terms of what do I love? My 3 favorite directors in order: Stanley Kubrick, Billy Wilder, and Quentin Tarantino. So I've seen all of Tarantino. That was the last movie I saw in the theaters, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which to me, it's like Jackie Brown. The first time you see it, you're not really impressed, but every time you see it, it keeps getting richer and richer and richer. The last film I saw, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, I saw it on HBO. It's funny. It's really funny. It relates to me as a child of immigrants. So many of those jokes are so relatable, and it's really well done. I really think so. The humor's a little bit corny, but hey, it works. It's a family film.
Oh yeah, it reminds me of my in-laws. Are you working on any? Well, actually, can I just loop back? You don't binge?
No, my wife, she has a Netflix account. We have it in our bedroom. And so she'll be in the, she watches so many shows. She's the one who turns me on to shows that I eventually watch. So maybe the last series that I saw, of course, Watchmen, which was magnificent. Regina King is such an amazing actress. I was always a fan of her, but even there more so. And the music by Trent Reznor, you want to talk about an amazing soundtrack. It's all there. But no, she'll lock herself out 3-4 hours, just watch show after show. She's watching Castle Rock right now. I'm sorry. I am old. I still subscribe to DirecTV, for crying out loud.
All right. Everyone in Alta is watching Perry Mason, by the way.
Oh yeah. So she watched Perry Mason. I'm actually.
So I'm on episode 5. So
okay, no. I'm not going to make any spoilers. But what fascinates me is actually, and Peter Richardson, what's up? And will appreciate this in terms of California history. There's a character there, obviously based on Amy Semple McPherson, the legendary not even street preacher, but mega preacher. This is the second time this year that there's been a dramatic interpretation of Amy. The other one was in the really bad reboot of Penny Dreadful that involved Chicano. So what is it that Californians at this point, 90 years later, we're still obsessed with Amy Semple McPherson? I'm doing a story about that. No one steal that story from me, please.
Okay. Are you working on a book? What's going to be your next book?
I am actually working on a co-production. UC Press, they've been doing this really interesting series called The People's Guide to. So they've done a People's Guide to Los Angeles, a People's Guide to Boston. I believe they did a People's Guide to San Francisco. So myself and a professor from UC Irvine and Cal State Fullerton, we're writing a People's Guide to Orange County. So all little blurbs with maps, with photos, trying to talk about, you know, the real Orange County. It's kind of a follow-up to my 2008 book, Orange County: A Personal History. It's supposed to come out next year, I believe in the fall. We just got approved by UC Press for our final manuscript. They loved it. So that's a collaboration. In terms of my own book, I have to talk to my agent. It's funny because I gave him an idea that it always happens, right? I gave him an idea that he loved, but he said it wasn't going to be able to turn into a book because, you know, I want to do a history of the truck driving industry in the United States. He said that no book editor has ever seen a big rig go down Broadway, so no one would ever buy that book. Lo and behold, there's all these books about the truck driving industry in the United States right now. On the other hand, years ago, my agent said, you know what, you should do a biography of Jerry Brown. And I said, who's going to care about a biography of Jerry Brown? And here we are.
We've got a question from Alta Editor-at-Large Mary Melton, who is our gal in LA. She has 2 media questions for you. All right, and we're running out of time, but we also have like a million more questions. So will there be a future for alt weeklies, or will they have to go to the nonprofit model to survive? That's one. I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, no future for alt weeklies because they're all owned by a bunch of morons who don't believe the writers who know how to make money for them. The problem with the nonprofits, como se dice, outlook for independent media is that it's all tied to grants and it's all tied to benefactors who want nice, positive, like, let's go out and take down bad guys. And that's not necessarily bad. In fact, that's admirable. But alt weeklies, they were at their best, you know, excuse my language, but just to shit talk. Just to, like, if you're going to go after the mayor, really, like, ridicule him right now. And just this deep cynicism with the world mixed in with hilarity. That's what I love so much about the publication that I used to be at, OC Weekly. Now I think the only publication that has that great mix of investigation, cynicism, and humor is The Baffler, which Thomas Frank invented. The Baffler magazine, they're so hilarious and just so dark in their humor. Nonprofit news agencies, none of them are that. I call them the Boy Scouts of journalism. They're so earnest, it's disgusting.
Next question. Mary Disney writes so beautifully and thoughtfully about food. What do you think of the kind of recent scandals and changes happening in food journalism, particularly at the top?
Oh, I mean, particularly at my newspaper, right? The Los Angeles Times, with the editor, Peter Meehan, being pushed out or resigning after all these allegations of sexual harassment and other stuff came out. It's time. I mean, you cannot have gatekeepers anymore that are frankly all white. Like, you should have, to me, it always disturbed me that I was one of the very few Latino, when I was at the OC Weekly, if not the only male Latino food editor in the entire United States, even though there's so many other great writers out there. I think it's important in food media. It's not just important to tell those first-person essays. I'm kind of over first-person essays, frankly, even as I'm currently writing one. But it's important to, como se dice, allow writers to go out and tell stories, not just of their community, but outside of their community as well. I mean, that's what Mary did when she was in LA Magazine. She would get writers like Bill Esparza and others to go out and tell stories that really showed what the true Los Angeles and not a tokenized Los Angeles. Is it going to be what's happening right now? Is it going to lead to changes that are going to remain? That remains to be seen. I'm still a big advocate. If the big boys are not going to allow your publication or allow your words to come out in their publications, just create your own publications as well. Especially right now, we're really in a renaissance of newsletters, and people are promoting, are contributing to those newsletters. Up in the Bay Area, Ileana Maisonet, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but on Instagram, she's Eat Gorda Eat. She's an amazing Puerto Rican food writer based out of Sacramento, used to write a column for the Chronicle. She has an amazing newsletter. Look her up. Eat Gorda Eat. Yeah, Eat Gorda Eat.
Eat Gorda Eat. Okay, and I know Amy wants us to go longer, but we're gonna. I know we're all busy. Last question, because I know you have a lot to say about this. Highly topical. Kamala Harris is the VP pick.
Woohoo!
Go.
Kamala Harris does not surprise me. She's nowhere near as radical as the Republican Party's already making her out to be. She's left, yes, but she's nowhere near as radical. My experience of Kamala Harris, though, is here in Orange County during the Orange County jailhouse snitch scandal, where a judge here, a Superior Court judge, kicked off the district attorney's office from prosecuting the case because they were so conflict of interest on it. he told us, the Attorney General at the time, Kamala Harris, you guys should take it over. Kamala Harris said no. So Kamala Harris sided with Tony Rakakis, a longtime district attorney in Orange County. I'll just leave it at that. Those of you who have read me for many, many years know exactly what I think about Tony Rakakis. Ta-da!
All right, are you sending Alta pitches, I hope?
I was supposed to do one to Blaze. It kind of fell through just because I got busy with stuff. But of course, I mean, the great thing, I am no longer allowed to freelance for any publications, but I have grandfather clauses with Alta because I'm a contributed editor, so therefore I'm part of the family. So, so Blaze, we'll talk soon. Let's do some fun stuff. We'll figure it out. But no, as long as Alta will have me, I will be a part of Alta.
Thank you. Heather, thank you. Gustavo, thank you. Folks, tune in next week. Heather is going to be teaching high school children and will not be able to join us. But we're going to have photographer Josie Iceland, who does, she has a new book out about incredible seaweed. It's kind of like an artistic look at seaweed. And she'll be in conversation with one of our Alta contributors, Jessica Zach. That'll be Wednesday, the 19th, right here at 12:30. Look up Gustavo everywhere you can find him. He is literally everywhere on the internet. And thank you both for joining us. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. It was a delight to have you. Stay safe. And as Gustavo would say, wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Gracias. Go to GustavoArellano.org. And thank you, Alta, for doing this. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.